Story 1. About 10 years ago, one of my nieces said, "Uncle, I have a secret to tell you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to super duper kill you the next time I see you." Now, I have seen her many times since then, and I have yet to be super duper killed. She seems pretty well adjusted, so I'm not too worried about it. Chuckles. But I did keep an eye on her the next time she saw me.
If you see her first, it doesn't count. She's waiting until she sees you first, then it's super duper kill time.
When my friend's kid was 5, she made a really silly song with the lyrics, punch you in the face, stab you in the face, and would laugh and laugh. Chuckles turned out to be a regular sweet teen.
See, you've already been super duper killed. What makes it super duper is that no one else knows but her.
Story 2. My 5-year-old nephew looked at my hands and said, "Your skin is starting to look like Grandpa's before he went in the ground." Chuckles. I moisturize aggressively now.
The other day, my wife and I went to a local wildlife park. As we were passing the kids' climbing area, a mom started to playfully chase one of her kids onto a spider web climbing structure. Then her other kid grabbed her leg and very seriously told her, "Mom, I don't think you should go on this because you might be too heavy and break it." Serious, absolutely stone cold.
Story 3. I wonder what you would look like without arms. And then she continued to play with her Legos.
I have a sweet little girl whose mother is a teacher. When I met her, she was 2, and this child could have full sentence conversations. She just turned 3 and came in to use our program. I told her that my coworkers weren't in, but she could play with this grump we have. She goes, "No." There were about 5 of us in the lobby, and we couldn't help but laugh. She asked a woman she'd never met before to come play with her instead. She doesn't even work there.
Oh, that's funny, loves. She picked a random person and was like, "You work here now." Huh. They just have no filter, do they? And I love that. When I lost my hair from chemotherapy, everyone said, "Oh, you look amazing, blah, blah." I didn't. I was bald and as white as Casper. But my goddaughter, who was 6, her mom said, "Do you like it?" She looked at me for a solid 30 seconds and said, "No, your head is shiny and it looks weird." Never laughed so hard. Only honest one in the bunch. Always cracked me up when the kids would imitate Mom. You got a real look into how some parents are. People really underestimate children. They know more than you think.
When my son was about 3 or 4, Chuckles, he had a meltdown because I wouldn't let him see my heart and lungs.
Story 4. Age 5. Walking with me through a Lowe's hardware store. Wow, there's a lot of murder weapons in here.
Chuckles, my autistic 11-year-old to his 90-year-old great-grandmother, who just turned down a second helping of dinner and more wine at the Christmas dinner table. You'll be dead soon, so why not be plump, happy, and dead? She's deaf as opposed to normally, but of course she heard him clear as day.
Shortly after my daughter learned that old people die, she was maybe 4, we were walking and happened to pass an old man. She asked me really loud. Chuckles, he absolutely had to have heard. "Is he going to die soon?"
I was pushing my then 3-year-old on the swing. She leaned back and, in her sweet, dreamy baby voice, said, "It's so beautiful. Look at the clouds, the blue sky, and zombies." Bang, bang. That totally made me look. We went back inside. No more outside for the crazy child. Chuckles.
Story 5. Sitting in the living room at night, watching The Sandlot with my 4-year-old, and he points toward the closet and says, "Mommy, that stuffed animal keeps looking at me." I was scared to look over, but when I did, it was staring at us. And it wasn't stuffed. There was a flying squirrel in our living room. We caught it and took pictures before we let it go. Adrenaline all night long.
I didn't expect that. Where do you live that has flying squirrels?
All of Eastern North America has flying squirrels.
Did that incident inspire your username?
Story 6. The house told me that this toy isn't mine. From a 4-year-old who had tears in his eyes and was serious.
The house can take its rude ass back upstairs and mind its business. Get your own toys, freeloader.
Give the toy to the house on your way out the door. Time to move. Leave all your stuff. The house can have it. You can get new stuff on Haunted Stuff.
For real. The house can learn to share, or it's going to get the holy water squirt bottle and it's going to learn today. And I'll say it again in Latin.
Story 7. Apparently, when I was about 6 years old, I got up at 2 a.m. when my parents were partying with their friends in the living room. I looked them all dead in the eye, wide-eyed, clutching my little toy cat and said, "You're all dying," because I had just learned that things get old and die, and I knew they were all older than me. So in my mind, they were closer to death. Then I looked at the person I thought was the oldest, and therefore closest to death, and said, "You're first." Chuckles. I don't know. I guess I just thought they needed to know. My parents.
I don't think any of them ever came back. Not for a long time, at least. That kind of thing became a regular occurrence with me when I was little, I guess. Just ask my teachers and the talking Christmas tree at the mall.
When I was very young and went trick-or-treating, we went to our old neighbors first, the ones I never really interacted with. When they opened the door, apparently I said, "Wow, you're old. Are you gonna die soon?" Cue my dad, with his face in his hands. Chuckles.
When I was about that age, we were at a remote campsite camping in tents, and my dad woke up to go to the toilet. I turned to him and said, "Daddy, what's the man doing with the knife?" Then I promptly fell back asleep. My dad decided he didn't need to go to the loo so badly after all. I couldn't remember it in the morning.
Story 8. My mom has told me stories about how I would tell her that my older brother and I were just friends before we were brothers, when I was a toddler. Chuckles.
One of my nieces will often make references to me about when we were kids together. It's happened since she could speak, and she gets very upset and argumentative when I tell her that I was already an adult, 24, when she was born. No, don't you remember when we were both little kids together? So now I don't tell her that I don't know what she's talking about. It seems like she just knows something that I don't.
Yeah, apparently I used to tell my parents about stuff that happened when I was big before I was small a lot. Chuckles. And I also knew my way around Warwick Castle, down to describing the furniture, the people who lived in certain rooms, and getting annoyed with the guide for not taking the most direct routes to the next part. I said I was a teacher there, and pointed to the nursery rooms where I lived. The guide confirmed what I was saying was correct. I'd never been there before, neither had my parents. I was only 3. I don't even really believe in reincarnation, but no one in my family has a logical explanation for this.
Story 9. My then 2-year-old was waving his little arms and asking a double amputee, who was just trying to look at clothes in Target, "Hey lady, why don't you have legs?" I was mortified. The woman was beyond tickled. I thought she was going to have a heart attack from laughing so hard.
I was at the park with my then 3-year-old son. There was an older lady who had obviously had some sort of facial surgery, with a large bandage or gauze covering her nose and part of her cheek. My son runs up to her, and without missing a beat, says, "Hey, what happened to your face?" She very kindly and patiently explained that she had been sick with cancer and saw the doctor who took out what made her sick and that she was okay now. "Okay, bye." And he runs off. Meanwhile, I'm standing there like a deer in the headlights. The lady was very understanding.
Not as bad, but when my niece was little, I took her grocery shopping with me. We were cruising down the aisle as she sat in the cart, and she leaned back and yelled, "Hey," to a lady looking at the chips. The lady, obviously startled, looked up at us, and my niece yelled, "Santa's watching you." We quickly made our exit.
A friend introduced her 3-year-old to my mom, who is quadriplegic. They explained why my mom was in a wheelchair and that she couldn't walk. The little girl just stared at my mom's feet with the deepest confusion, then looked up at her and asked, "But then why do you wear shoes?" Chuckles, my mom thought it was hilarious.
Story 10. Most recently, my 6-year-old informed me she no longer likes my boobs. Well, 3 kids and 3 years total of breastfeeding later, me either kid. Chuckles, you're welcome, I guess.
Some of the kids I babysat over the years were very vocal about their opinions on my boobs. When I was 14, I babysat a 7-year-old girl who told me she liked my boobs and couldn't wait to get some of her own. Then she tried to reach up into my shirt to touch them. I was mortified and just sort of told her, "You can't touch people like that." Chuckles, when I was 19, I nannied for 2 kids who were 7 and 9. I would come over to their house around 10 p.m. and sleep over since the parents worked early shifts. That summer, Adult Swim was showing reruns of Pee-wee's Playhouse, so the kids would get on either side of me, cuddle up, and we'd watch it before bed. They both told me they liked snuggling and watching stuff with me because I had very soft boobs that they liked to lay their heads on. They told me this while their mom was in the room, and she thought it was fucking hysterical.
Oh boy, I have a story kind of like the second one, but with my cat. I got her before puberty. She loved snuggling with my mom on the couch and always had to pat down her boobs before resting on them. But when she'd pat me down, there was of course nothing, so she would leave. I was so offended, and I kept getting rejected until I finally hit puberty and grew them big enough for her satisfaction, laughing my ass off.
When my kid was 3, he told me, a cisgender male, I can't wait until I have boobies just like you, Dada. Yeah, I need to lose some weight. Chuckles.
Story 11. My 2 nieces, 9 and 10, came up to me with serious looks on their faces and said, "You won't die before we grow up, will you? Where did that come from?" I replied, "I'll try very hard not to."
My daughter essentially had an existential crisis when my grandma died because she realized everyone dies, including her, and me, and everyone she knows. That was a brutal evening. She was 5.
When I was 6, I started role-playing how I'd react if different family members died. I role-played my mom dying the most because she was the worst driver of my parents.
My son had leukemia when he was young and is in remission now. He didn't quite grasp the severity of it back then, but now and then he asks some hard questions. His dad will be in the middle of watching an anime after a 12-hour shift, half asleep, and our son will dance in, asking him, "If I got leukemia again and died, would you cry at my funeral?" All while doing the latest TikTok dance move flawlessly.
Story 12. Apparently, when I was 4, I was mad about being put in timeout, so I told my mom that I would cut her in half, which absolutely freaked her out. Chuckles. She cried to my dad, saying that I hated her. We didn't watch violent things, and I had no exposure to it, so my parents had no idea where it came from. I'm 22 now, still with a clean record and a mother who is, in fact, not cut in half.
My cousin used to talk about killing his mom with a lawnmower when he was around 4 or 5 years old. He's in his 30s now and hasn't done it yet, but he does work on lawnmowers.
Story 13. My 3-year-old son asked me if the old lady in the corner lived with us. This was in my house and there was no one there.
One night, I woke up and my closet doors swung slowly open over the carpeted floors that I usually have to tug hard to move. Weird, but maybe the air currents were straight. The next night, my 2-year-old daughter couldn't sleep, so I brought her to the same spare room with me. She woke up suddenly, pointed at the closet, and screamed, "What is that? What is that?" I asked her what she saw, and in a deadpan voice, she said, "A man." I have never believed in ghosts, but that had me looking up Ghostbusters stuff at 3 a.m. I have degrees in physics and chemistry, but that experience flipped me from a Scully to a Mulder real quick.
My son called them the shadows. At 3:30 in the morning, he'd wake up screaming, "The shadows are here." I told him to tell them to go away, and they never came back. A week later, driving to my parents' house next to a cornfield, he starts laughing and says, "Mom, can I play with the kids in the corn?" "Fuck no, you can't." "What the fuck?"
My son did this when he was about 5. We were visiting my mother-in-law, and my son was playing in a spare room. After a little while, he called us in to take down a picture because the woman in it was talking to him. We asked what she was saying. He said, "Nothing really, just that I'm a good, handsome boy playing well by myself." We're like, "That's great. Why do you want a picture down?" "'Cause she won't leave me alone." Chuckles. Turns out it was a picture of my mother-in-law. That made her very happy. He was always turning pictures face down and statues around so they wouldn't stare at him. To this day, he hates Mr. Peanut.
Story 14. My 3-year-old son has a few stories like this. Breathing deeply, he called me in the middle of the night crying. I lay down with him and he fell back asleep. The next day I asked what happened and he said there were men in his room who kept opening and closing their mouths at him. No thanks. He wanted to set up a play tent in his room. We did so and he had a blast playing with it the whole day. He asked to leave it up so he could play with it the next day again. When my husband put him to bed, he kept getting up and peeking at it. My husband asked what's wrong. His response, Daddy, I don't like the tent. I think there is someone in there. Needless to say, they had to take it down immediately. He called me to his room after waking up in the morning. I lay down next to him and he looked at me and Mommy, "Who's in there?" I turned around, freaking out, to see the wardrobe was cracked open. My husband had taken socks out of it that morning and forgot to close it. I put him down for a nap and I was lying next to him. He looked past my face to the corner of his room, raised his little finger and pointed. I freaked out again and turned very slowly, trying not to startle him. "Look, Mommy, there is my rain jacket." At this point, I'm not sure if he is just trolling me or what.
Your son either sees hella ghosts or is just fucking with you. Laughing my ass off.
I know this takes the fun out of it, but it's actually fairly common for kids to hallucinate before falling asleep or shortly after waking up, like 10% of young kids.
Story 15. My family moved when my sisters were quite small, maybe 4 and 6. I was barely 1, so no memory of that time. But apparently, my sister who was 4 at the time cried for the first 3 nights in the new house. 4th night, she went to bed, no crying. My mom asked her the next day what changed. She said the people in the window told her everything was fine, and she was safe there. My mom was amused. My sister's room was on the 2nd floor. She asked my sister what they looked like. My sister proceeded to describe 3 of our 4 grandparents, none of whom lived to see any of us born.
What was the 4th grandparent? Just over it?
Story 16. Putting my 4-year-old daughter to bed one night, she looks me right in the eyes. Only with the night light can I see her face, and she whispers, "There's something in the garage."
I don't know. I double-checked that the door was locked after that. Why would I go in there?
At 2 years old, I told my dad there was a monster in the basement. Sure, kiddo. Chuckles softly. An hour later, Mom found the basement carpet ripped to shreds. It turned out a groundhog had accidentally gotten into the house and was trying to dig its way out. I didn't know what the furry thing was, so I'd gone with monster.
If it helps, I was yelling no, don't go in the garage. That's where the killer is.
Story 17. Mommy, do you remember when I was an old man and you were a little baby and I took care of you and then I died? No, ma'am, I do not remember that.
That was my, is she a changeling? Is she psychic? Was she abducted by aliens? Kid. Chuckles, we brought her home from the hospital and her mobile would randomly start spinning. It had to have batteries and be turned on to work. Up until she was about 7, she'd stare at the corner of the ceiling and talk to things no one else could see, full of laughter and conversations. She finally stopped about age 7 or 8 and became fairly normal.
Story 18. I was putting my 4-year-old to bed, and she looked up and said, "One day, there won't be any plants in the world, just people and dirt." What?
Did she mention how many more years we have left?
Story 19. Chuckles. Why do I remember parachuting into France? My little brother, who was about 4 or 5 at the time.
Probably a bug in the matrix. Some files don't get completely scrubbed when the IT department is bogged down with thousands of files coming in at once. Or some other weird sci-fi or religious stuff going down. The cache file is full, sir. They're dying too fast for us to erase all their memories before we plug them back into the game. Damn it, Johnson. Just dump what you've got and keep those cache files moving.
Native people have been saying this for centuries. We believe that children have 1 foot in this world and 1 foot in the spirit world until the age of 6 or 7. My niece and I were sleeping at an Airbnb, and she was about 6. We woke up at 3 a.m. on the Sleepily, she said to me, "Yeah, there's a gray woman without feet that just passed by." Totally unbothered, nonchalant. I have memories of seeing spirits around that age, too. It was just normal.
When my son, who was really into space at the time and was about the same age, said that before he was in my tummy, he had been a cosmonaut, I said, "Oh, you were an astronaut," because I was only half listening. He got mad. No, I said cosmonaut. He was absolutely insistent he was a cosmonaut. It struck me as so weird because we're American. I would have figured he'd say astronaut. I figured one of his books had used the term, maybe talking about the first man in space. When he was in preschool, I flipped through his books. No mention of cosmonauts. He also insisted that he and his younger sister played together in the void before either of them were born. Sweet, but unsettlingly phrased.
Story 20. This is a secondhand story about me. Obviously, I don't remember it because I was 3 years old. My mom was pregnant at the time, and my parents were having financial struggles because they already had 2 kids under 4. I was 3, my brother was 2. One day my mom was feeling sad, and I said, "Don't worry, Mommy. After the baby dies, Daddy will find a better job." My sister was indeed stillborn. My dad did find a better job very shortly afterward. My mom does not believe in any psychic powers or anything like that, so she has always been just as baffled by this as I am whenever I think about it.
Jesus Christ. Laugh out loud. Your poor mother, though.
Story 21. One day, I was babysitting my little cousin, and she asked me for a snack. Her parents typically kept them out of reach, so she wouldn't devour them all in one sitting. I grabbed a chair so I could reach the top of their fridge, and my little cousin completely freaked out as soon as I stepped on it. She said, and I quote, No, don't do that. That's how the lady that lives in my bathroom died." She was dead serious and tearing up. Chills ran through my body, and I took her to the park immediately because I was scared. Come to find out, the previous owner fell and broke her neck while standing on a bar stool, changing a light fixture.
Nope. I read a similar story, which may or may not be true, of course, where someone's toddler daughter would talk to someone while playing by herself. She called her the blue-faced mommy. They found out a previous tenant had hung herself after a miscarriage.
Thinking of it from the ghost's perspective, it was really kind of the daughter to just spend time with her.
I wouldn't be able to handle that. We'd have to move.
Story 22. When my son was 3, he was snuggling on my lap and turned to me and said, "You have a passenger." I took a pregnancy test, and sure as shit, he was right. Chuckles. Better than a chest burster, but still pretty unnerving.
My youngest son did that to my oldest son's wife. My youngest was about 3 or 4. We were visiting my oldest son and his wife at their apartment. Youngest son hugged his daughter-in-law, pulled back, and said, "You have a baby in there." I immediately said, "Oh, silly boy." But as I was speaking, I saw the look that passed between them. They just found out, like that day or the day before. Little kids know somehow.
He had another weird moment. We were told at 9 weeks there was a tumor in the baby's neck, highly associated with terminal genetic disorders, and to prepare for a miscarriage or possibly a stillbirth. So we decided not to tell him about the baby's health until we knew for sure what the outcome would be. One day he was talking to my belly, looked up and said, "She says she's going to be okay, Mama." We didn't know the gender yet, and the next week or so I got the blood test results that we were having a girl, and the tests were negative for what a blood test could measure. Spooky kid.
I was going through fertility treatments to have another baby. No one knew but me and my husband. My 3-year-old said to me one day, "You have a baby in your tummy." I thought, wow, this is going to be an amazing story if she's right. Alas, ladies and gentlemen, there was not a baby in my tummy. Chuckles.
Story 23. My son once told me a very detailed story about how he died in a car accident in his former life. He knew his name, his wife's name, and where he lived. A completely different country. He was only 3 years old at the time.
This happened 27 years ago. I never did any research about what he told me, and honestly, I don't want to know. Even if it isn't true, it was an amazing experience to have with my kid.
Story 24. I took my 4-year-old to an event at a local military museum. They had a Black Hawk helicopter on display. They confidently climbed into the cockpit, put on the helmet, leaned forward, and started going through the switches and dials on the dashboard. Then they realized they couldn't reach the rudder pedals. They froze for a moment, turned everything back to how it was, and reached out for me to lift them out of the door. In the car afterwards, they told me, "I used to fly those. Maybe I can when I'm bigger again." That still hits me when I think about it.
My son is 5 years old, and we got talking about the afterlife after his religion class in school, as you do. I explained that nobody knows what happens for certain, and if they tell you they do, they're lying. I know. I was old before and closed my eyes. Then I was a baby with a new mama. That will happen to me again when I'm old this time. I hope so.
I was about 4 when I told my mom all about my other mother. Apparently, she abused me and drowned me in a swimming pool. I still have an image of that pool in my head. My son passed a graveyard and said he wanted to go and visit my grandmother, and then he said her real name. I never called her by that name. I actually kind of forgot that was her name, so he never heard it before. It was a bit weird.
My daughter, for as long as she's been able to talk, has told stories about how she used to live on Mars before she was chosen to come live with Mommy and Daddy. She's 15 now and still says she has fuzzy memories of living on Mars.
Story 25. My daughter, when she was about 5, told my mother that she was her sister. My mom had a twin who died at birth.
When I was 3, I thanked my mom for giving me the nice daddy instead of the mean one. She aborted an abusive man's fetus 10 years before I was born. I then told her and my aunt that I wanted to stay with my friends in the other place, but they said they'd find me later, so it's okay. And also that Earth isn't so bad once you get back here. I was wrong. Weirdly, most of my friends and my boyfriend are a few years younger than I am.
Oh my gosh, this reminded me of my old coworker. Her dad got cancer and passed away when her son was maybe 4 or 5. They all met back at his house after leaving the hospital to visit and grieve together. Her son was playing in the front room. He came into the kitchen and said, "Why is everyone crying?" To which my coworker told him that Grandpa was gone and he was going to be missed very much. He said he's not gone. He told me he was okay in the front room before he floated to the ceiling.
I came to talk about my ex's little brother. They moved from another country to the United States, and the boy would say things like, "I need to go back to X country because I need to see my wife and kids." They would just think he was watching too much TV and stuff, and would actually stop him from watching adult-type shows. The other quirk? He was obsessed with guns. That one they couldn't explain because it's not something the parents knew anything about.
Story 26. My godson passed away young. His older sisters were only 10 and 11. I don't remember which one said it. While we were in the hospital and he was still on life support, I took them to get some real food just away from their extended family. And she said to me, "I knew he wouldn't live. No one had to tell me. I saw his soul leave already. Don't tell Mommy. She thinks it's still there." Then the other one got a look on her face and said, "I'm pretty sure I saw him leave too. We said goodbye that night." I later followed up on this exchange with them. They don't remember it at all, but I don't expect them to. It was so hard on my godbabies, and I'll never mention it again.
This is so tragic. Kids are so intuitive, and the fact that she didn't want to break their mom's heart too soon by saying that to her is heartbreaking and so emotionally intelligent.
My goddaughters are really amazing. I never told their parents about what they said, though I'm sure Mom would feel comforted, in a sense, that her girls got to say goodbye in their own way.
This is so wild. My daughter saw me with her brother when I knew he was already gone. I wonder if she saw anything like that.
Story 27. Tucking my daughter into bed, she whispers, "Tell the tall man behind you to stop staring at me. It's making me sleepy." I was alone in the room. I didn't sleep that night. Story 28. My 6-year-old sister at the time once asked me what kidneys do, so I explained it to her in a basic way so she'd get the general idea. She said she heard about someone donating a kidney and asked how donors survive. So I said that your body can function with one kidney. She said, "I want to donate both of mine to Granddad." Chuckles. Granddad's long dead, way before she was born. Story 29. I'm a stupid fuck, because that's what her dad called her when she was a toddler. It was a long time ago.
Hearing kids talk like that or describe their abuse is awful, especially when they don't emotionally react to what they say. The worst I heard was, they put me in the dog cage when they babysat me. I'm a therapist, and this kid had been extremely abused by their mother and the people their mother allowed to care for them. I think they rank in my top 3 clients for most mandatory reports to Child Protective Services.
I've got a heartbreaker. I brought my new husky puppy to my son's baseball practice. This is recent, actually. Interesting it came up. Anyway, this little girl couldn't have been older than 8, had that meth voice. Anyone who's been around it knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, she said, "I like your dog. We had cats. but they died, and the ants ate them. Holy shit. Her clothes were all stained too. Man, that really messed with me.
This reminds me of the undoing of my last polycule. My boyfriend and I were in the family room, and one of our partners, married to his own primary, was on the other side of the partition wall in the dining room with his infant son. The kid was being very fussy, crying a lot that morning and doing typical baby stuff. When my partner walked around the wall to go into the kitchen, he watched our partner say, "I hate you," in this awful, emotionless tone while staring directly into the baby's eyes. My boyfriend immediately confronted him and, after a short, heated argument, texted our partner's wife to let her know what happened. There were other, non-devastating reasons why, but we moved out that month. They ended up divorcing a short while afterwards. Thankfully, their son seems well-adjusted now. Mom remarried to a very nice guy, but that incident still sticks with me. The father was always saying little shitty things here and there, and kids do remember. I hope that little boy always remembers how much he is loved over that hatred.
Story 30. Chuckles softly, my then 7-year-old daughter, who is now a university professor, said, "Fuck you," laughed, and ran out the door while I was upbraiding her. Unfortunately, I also started laughing.
My friend called her 20-year-old son a son of a bitch. He started laughing uproariously, and though she started out furious, she soon had to admit it was pretty funny and ended up laughing too.
I left my 20-month-old son for 2 hours with his dad, while my next-door neighbor gave me a surprise baby shower for my soon-to-be-born baby. When I came home, he was running around, laughing, yelling, "Son of a bitch." Turns out his dad was going to give him a bath, and Dad yelped when he touched the water. Chuckles, they never say the words you're trying to teach him, but latch on to any no-no word.
Story 31. When my son was about to turn 3, a dear friend of mine had gone missing. He asked why I was crying, and I told him that a friend was missing and people had been searching for him for 3 days. He told me my friend was alive but very hurt. He was technically correct on that day, but by the time my friend was found, it wasn't as hopeful. It makes me wonder if small children are more connected to the answers.
I'm sorry. Children are super sensitive. My 1-year-old has been clinging to my mom and to me lately. We didn't know why until now. My mom has cancer again, and I'm pregnant with baby number 2.
Unfortunately, yes. There is evidence of a kidnapping, but he's never been brought to justice.
Story 32. My little sister had only just started talking, and she said in almost perfect English, "When I was your mother, you were my baby. You were crying, and we died in a car."
I believe you. I've had a child who cried inconsolably for his best friend, his son, and his pet duck. He used to dream about them, too. I had another son who had invisible friends named Ahmed and Amin. He would also say things like "Assalamu alaikum." He was 2. At the time, he had never known anyone with these names, nor did he know anyone who was Arabic. This was in 2002, so no exposure to online things like there is today, either.
When my now 10-year-old was between the ages of 2 and 3, she used to tell me that she used to be my mom, and I was the baby, and someday she would get to be my mom again. I'm not sure what I think about past lives, but I bet she would be a good mom, so I'm all for it.
As someone who has gone through this, don't think of it as a sprint nor a marathon. It's a transcontinental migration. It is so difficult and takes so much time, but you will pass through this too. It is going to be awful. You already know that. You will reach a point where it is okay. Not that it never hurts, but that you are okay. It's difficult to believe now. It will happen for you. I'm so very sorry. And if you need to talk, feel free to hit me up.
Story 33. When my daughter was maybe 2 years old, in the middle of the night, I woke up to her voice over the baby monitor saying, "I see you," over and over. I bolted out of bed and ran to her room to find a baby with poor enunciation asking a tissue for her runny nose, and not, in fact, telling some hidden figure that they'd been spotted. Story 34. When my daughter was around 14 months old, she was standing on her toddler tower eating breakfast at the counter while I was doing dishes. I looked over and she had locked eyes with a corner in the ceiling of the kitchen. I just watched her stare into the corner for another 30 seconds or so, and then she waved. I almost wanted to snatch her up and run, but then she said, "Hi, Gigi." Gigi is my grandmother who passed away almost 10 years ago. I instantly felt calm again and a little teary-eyed.
Chuckles, a fun follow-up. When we took her to the beach for the first time a few months later, it was the same beach where we spread her ashes. My daughter was playing in the water. She looked out at the horizon and just said, "Hi, Gigi," again. That one did make me tear up.
Story 35. Our cat recently died. My 4-year-old daughter asked to get a new one. I said no because Dad is allergic to cats. The cat was mine before we met. He's a good man who lived with the allergies for a decade for me. I explained this to her. She was quiet for a moment, then said, completely earnestly, "When Daddy dies, can we get a cat?" Story 36. My 3-year-old stopped what she was doing, looked at me and said, "Uncle Andy is on fire," several times. I had to call and tell him, and he said he was about to start the grill. He opted out of grilling that night. Story 37. List of things my 10-year-old has said in the past 10 years. Amused, crossing his eyes. Sorry, I'm in the blurry zone. At 6 years old. Mom, they said hi. Mysterious. Looking out into the completely barren desert. They're here. At 4 years old. Scared. Looking at apartments and suddenly having a meltdown. I don't want to go in there. There's monsters.
I don't want to go in there. There are monsters. I vividly remember the train that was under my bed when I was 4. I mean, to my 4-year-old brain, it was there as real as anything. And terrifying. My poor parents.
I do think kids can sense certain things. When we were looking at homes many years ago, there was a home that my daughter did not like.
She was 3 at the time.
It was a nice house, priced right, and she had been happy at all the other homes we looked at. She just said it made her feel bad, and it was dark. We did not buy that house or even consider it after she said that.
Chuckles wild. My son, when he was 2, would talk about a train that would take him to Babyland. He had names for the people he knew there. I would ask him all sorts of questions, and he had answers for everything. He's older now, and I just had another baby. He's been asking me if a new baby goes to Babyland too.
Story 38. Mommy, is that your hand on my shoulder? I was cuddling in bed with my 4-year-old, my arm around her waist but not touching her shoulder. My husband was downstairs with my father-in-law, who was at death's door after a battle with cancer. I quickly went downstairs, and my husband had fallen asleep in the chair by his dad, who had just passed away. His grandkids were his pride and joy, and I think he visited them on his way out. My youngest was just 1, so I don't know if she had the same sensation. Story 39. An old friend of mine who had moved away was in town with her family. They were staying at an Airbnb, and my husband and I went to visit them there. The Airbnb had a very elaborate tiki bar in the basement. Her kids, who were probably 7 and 4 at the time, were super to show us the tiki bar. They had a ton of energy and were running and jumping around, super happy to point out all the palm trees, coconuts, and all the fun decor down there. There was also a closet door with a lock on it. The 4-year-old paused from all the jumping around and laughing, pointed to the door, and very somberly said, "Someone's ghost lives in there," and then immediately turned around to start running and laughing and pointing out the parrot statue. I finished the tiki bar tour as quickly as I could and ran back upstairs. Story 40. A child I did not know at my niece's birthday party, completely unprompted, told me that if I ever got stabbed, I should not remove the knife myself or I might bleed to death. Chuckles. Story 41. My stepmom gifted us an angel tree topper for our Christmas tree. It was her mother's, who had passed away recently. My son was almost 3 at the time. When we decorated the tree and I got the topper out, he said, "Oh wow, Gamaline's mama is an angel now and she gets to be on our tree." He had never seen a picture of the woman. And that particular Christmas, he would ask me to take the angel topper off daily so he could play with Gamaline's mama. It blew my mind, but my stepmom loved it so much. Story 42. When my oldest was around 3 or 4, I was reading her a bedtime story. She was fixated on the upper corner of the room and suddenly said, "Look at those eyes." There was nothing there, not even decorations or a stain or anything that looked like eyes. I brushed it off and kept reading. Next she said, "What are the eyes doing?" I just said, I'm not sure. Let's finish the story. Finally, she told me, the eyes are moving. I slammed the book shut and bolted out of there so fast. I felt guilty for that, but she didn't seem scared by it, just curious. This is the child who also told me, around that same age, that she saw the figure of a man with a deer head standing at the foot of her bed while we were on vacation.
Oh man, I was on a camping trip with my 3-year-old, and she had to pee after dark. We went out to the outhouse at the campsite, and she tells me happily, there are a lot of bad eyes in here. Oh, they went inside you. Thanks, kiddo. If we had been alone instead of camped together with other families, I think that amount of creepiness would have made me take us home early.
Story 43. I was showing my 4-year-old Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. They turned to me midway through and said, they killed him, didn't they? Story 44. My favorite kids to babysit for were a family of 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. The girl once said, sometimes daddy yells and then mommy cries. It broke my heart. I already knew he was a jerk, but it was a surprise to hear he was cruel to his wife. They divorced years later. I hope she found a partner worthy of her. She was the nicest mom in the neighborhood. Story 45. A little boy who lived across the street from me, whom I nannied for, told me he watched me from his window while I slept. Chuckles nervously, he couldn't have seen me, but it was weird. Story 46. When I worked for Head Start, there was a little girl who would tell me about Jordy. Apparently, Jordy whispered mean things through the backyard fence at her, and would make mean faces out the window at her when she left for school. He was so mean, her cat never wanted to play outside anymore, and her bird feeder didn't get birds anymore either. Dad didn't seem to care, but when I told Mom, she was confused. The house next door was empty. It had been empty for the 5 or so months they'd lived there since moving in. Story 47. My kid reminded me that I'm older than every dog alive. That was an experience.
A very philosophical view and a thought I've never had before. Until now.
Story 48. I think mine might be unsettling for a completely different reason. My last job, I worked with a great guy named Ben for 11 years. We're still dear friends. One major difference that was often a topic of discussion was that he was deeply religious, like super involved in his church, and he carries his Bible everywhere he goes. I'm an atheist. I don't hate Christianity or Christians as a whole. It's just never made sense to me. And I never had a problem talking to Ben about it because he was a real Christian. I know many people who claim to be Christian but almost never act like it. But Ben was the real deal. So the first time I met his 4 kids and wife was at their house for dinner. No more than 10 minutes after shaking his 14-year-old son's hand, he asked me if I was a believer in Christ. I did not want to lie to him because Ben always talked about how mature he was. So I just said, no, I'm not. I think faith is just a gift I've never received. This kid just smiled, looked at me and said, that's okay, man. He still loves you. And he never said another word about it. I know that's not disturbing or anything like that. It was just a moment of realization for me. And as simple as that statement was, it hit me pretty hard. I was used to fake Christians who endlessly try to convert you or judge you in a way that they think is sneaky. I have a lot of family members like that. But that whole family made me realize that not all Christians are that way, and I don't need to avoid people just because they're Christians. I thought all Christians were judgmental, which is me judging other people just in a different way. Now I give Christians the benefit of the doubt until they prove that they're judgmental. Story 49. When my son was around 4 years old, he was in my husband and my room, standing at the end of the bed looking toward it. I asked what he was doing, and he said, can't you see? So I said, see what? And he replied, the man in the hat. He pointed toward the end of the bed. There was no one else in the room with us. The same son used to hate going to sleep in his room. He said that people grabbed at his legs when he was trying to sleep.
You might know this already, but the Hat Man is a super common thing that people see.
Heads up, it's pretty creepy. But if it helps, my partner saw him multiple times as a kid and grew up to be totally normal and awesome. Smiles.
My younger sister and I saw the Hat Man several times when we were really young. He was always standing outside the doorway in our upstairs bathroom when we saw him, and he would retreat out of view when we looked directly at him, but slow enough that we could get a decent look at him. It always happened when I was completely alone in the bathroom. I never told anyone about it, and I just assumed my memories were due to an overactive imagination. It wasn't until I was a teenager and my family was talking about creepy things that my sister mentioned happening to her. It was freaky because it happened in the exact same place, around the exact same age, and we never told each other about it. My sister and I grew up to be well-adjusted adults, but to this day, we still make sure to fully close that bathroom door when we're visiting home. Chuckles.
Story 50. Mummy, I murder you. I was very confused and a bit creeped out. Then he put a measuring tape on me, looked at it and said, I murder you. Chuckles. Story 51. She said, have you ever been stung by a bee? I said yes, and she said, well, you're gonna get stung again. I just kinda said, okay. Chuckles got stung later that day. Story 52. Little homie walked up to me, covered in scratches, and says, the cat doesn't like when I stick this finger up his butt. Chuckles. Well, now you know, and that's science right there.
Okay, the phrasing makes it sound like he was going to test out some of the other fingers, though. Chuckles. Laughing my ass off.
Index finger.
Bad. Check.
Middle finger. Bad.
Check.
Now let's try the ring finger.
Story 53. Chuckles nervously, my 3.5-year-old said to me the other day, I will be sitting there when you and Daddy die. Story 54. I once babysat an extremely ADHD boy, about 8 or 9 years old maybe, for whom homework was a nightly battle. Once, he revolted against a worksheet so hard that I had to call his mother. When she arrived, he opened his bedroom window, climbed into the frame, and threatened to jump if she made him do the worksheet. Stone calm. I kid you not, that woman said, honey, it's a second-floor window. If you jump, you're not going to die. You're going to break your leg or maybe your arm. Then we're going to the emergency room, and because you're not having a heart attack, they won't see you right away. We'll have to sit and wait, maybe for hours, and it's going to hurt the whole time. I don't want to spend my evening that way, so please get out of the window. And it worked. Chuckles. I can't remember whether he did the worksheet though.
That's exactly the way I speak to my kids. Glad to know I'm not the only one who says it as it is.
Story 55. My then 4-year-old daughter. While driving her home from daycare, she said, Mama, when mommies and daddies fight, someone is going to jail. At 5 years old, when Cody dies, I will be sad. Our dog had been sick, and my husband and I were very careful about having end-of-life conversations away from home.
The first thing was probably just her repeating something another kid told her at preschool. Sad that a kid that young had to know that, though. Kids shouldn't have to be exposed to domestic violence.
Story 56. I turned on the TV, and High School Musical was on. My daughter had definitely never seen it before. She started dancing, saying she used to watch it with her old family when she was a baby. Chuckles. Story 57. My 5-year-old, as we're driving past a cemetery. Look at all those dead people. That's sad. I explained that some of them lived long, happy lives, and that death isn't terrible. 5-year-old. And then we sew their skins into our clothing. Chuckles. She had been learning about leatherworking in preschool, and it didn't register that you don't just use any skins. Story 58. I once walked past a young boy outside. He was walking along, whistling an unfamiliar tune. The strange thing was the sound didn't seem to come from his mouth. It clearly came from about a meter or two away from his head. There was no one else around. Creepy as fuck.
That was definitely a leprechaun, and he was trying to trick you into following him to his pot of gold so he could rip off your fingers, just like in Leprechaun 4. But before he gets a chance to rip your fingers off, in an attempt to escape him, you decide to become an astronaut and get sent to the space station. Little did you know, he had planned for this all along. The leprechaun returns in Leprechaun in Space.
Dude, that's exactly what happened. In fact, I'm at the space station right now. Don't tell me he's... Screams F. GRRGH.
Aya.
Gasp. Breathes heavily. I'm not going to make it. Tell Horatio. I'm proud of them. Also, the treasure is buried in Groans Erg.
Story 59. She didn't say it, but she did it. My sister, who was around 5 years old, took a bite out of my dad's waist right after he finished showering and was wearing only shorts. My dad felt a sudden pain, and we all saw a chunk of flesh missing from his waist, with my sister laughing. Chuckles. That chunk of flesh was nowhere to be found. She's a very well-adjusted adult now, but God, was she a menace back then? Story 60. My toddler niece once ran out of my old bedroom looking terrified. She couldn't describe what had scared her, but she made a noise like BFF, and my brother-in-law offered buffalo, which she picked up, having no idea what an actual buffalo was. Buffalo appeared in various places and seriously frightened her, but no one else ever saw them. On a trip to London, she adamantly refused to enter the tower because there were too many sad buffaloes in there. Story 61. I am a preschool teacher in New York, and I've been one for over a decade, including in some unsavory neighborhoods. The worst things I've ever heard came from the same little boy. First incident. He said, "You fucking bitch." He used it correctly towards another female classmate. It was insane watching a little girl be called that for the first time. Second thing he said, "I just don't like it when daddy hits mommy and yells. I just cover my little sister's ears when he's yelling at her." He was 3, she was 2. They had gone to a domestic violence shelter because he was stalking them. And when she went back to collect her and her children's belongings, everything was covered in bed bugs. Story 62. I work in child and adolescent inpatient psychiatry, so I've heard a lot of unsettling things come out of kids' mouths. Chuckles. But the one that really haunts me? An 11-year-old kid I was playing cards with just nonchalantly said, "Yeah, I'm gonna be a serial killer someday. I won't kill you though. Maybe. We'll see." From knowing his history and witnessing all the things he had done during his stay, I firmly believe he wasn't just saying that to mess with me like all the other kids who've said stuff like that. The average stay at our hospital is 2 weeks. He was with us for 6 months. Most terrifying kid I've ever encountered. The stories I could tell.
What happened to him afterwards? Do you know?
Story 63. My 3-year-old kid once told me a monster was flying outside our window. He refused to go near that window and wouldn't let me go near it without screaming and crying. Chuckles nervously. That was pretty freaky. Story 64. A little boy in church told me about the abuse he was receiving when I pulled him out into the hall because he was disruptive. I was appalled, aghast, offended, saddened, scared, and so many other things all at once. I spoke to the state's Child Protective Services to start the investigation. I left that church before finding out the final disposition of his case, and I only had the initial discussion with the Protective Services Division. Story 65. Say hi to your mama. It was the 12th anniversary of her death, and he was pointing at the kitchen light and smiling. He was only 2 and had never met Mom. It was comforting and scary at the same time. Story 66. When my daughter was about 3 or 4, I was brushing her hair one morning and must have pulled a bit too hard. She turned around and said, "My other mom never hurt me when she brushed my hair." I froze and asked, "What do you mean, your other mom?" And she just started talking. She said her other mom had very long hair and was very kind. She talked about having lots of brothers and sisters, but only getting along with 2 of them. One sister was named Lacey, and apparently they were very close. Over the next months, she would casually mention this other family like they were real memories, not pretend stories. Then around age 5, it completely stopped. No more comments. No more memories. She's 9 now, and when I asked her about it, she had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. She doesn't remember any of it at all. Still one of the strangest things I've experienced as a parent. Story 67. When my son was 4 years old, he walked up to my 89-year-old grandma and said, "Your soul will be collected tonight." He is not a prophet because grandma is still alive and well, but I'm sure she didn't get much sleep that night. Chuckles.
My son said a lot of weird stuff around that age. One night, he came into our bed and said, "I'm mad at you." We asked why, and he said, "Because I was happy up high in heaven. I had a lot of dogs, and you made me." When you made me, I had to leave my dogs and fall through a hole. We aren't religious and never really spoke about heaven. So we asked him who told him this, and he said, my left foot. It tells me things. Chuckles.
Maybe a year later, we were watching the live-action Full Metal Alchemist movie. I had seen only a few episodes of the anime and had no idea there were zombies in it. In the movie, they look awful, so my daughters and I were making fun of them. My son starts getting upset, so we asked him what's wrong. He says, "Stop making fun of the zombies. I wish I had a zombie army that I could control." Chuckles for quite a while. We were certain he would turn out to be an evil supervillain.
My nephew, he's 31 now, and I were lying down up north at the cottage. I'm only 11 years older than him. He said, "Auntie, there's someone behind you." But behind me was just a wall. I jumped up and screamed, and he came running, screaming after me. We were both screaming.
Story 68. My son, who was 4 at the time, overheard my cousin and me talking. She was heavily pregnant, and I was 6 months behind her. She was wondering what her baby would be like. He spoke up and said, "She's got beautiful brown eyes, curly hair, and she's going to be wicked smart. She already loves you." We asked him how he knew, and he looked us in the face and said, "Oh, I've known her since we were waiting." Waiting for what? Waiting in the place to be born. I know your grandfather too, and your other grandfather, Mom.
I forgot to mention, she does have beautiful brown eyes, curly hair, and she's wicked smart.
Story 69. My daughter was 5 years old at the time. I went to check on her to make sure she was asleep. She rolled over and in her sleep said, "I must not eat people. People aren't food." Chuckles.
Had you been watching Finding Nemo recently? Curious.
Story 70. We have a statuette of a person in the corner of our wall-to-wall, built-in bookshelf. It freaks my daughter out, so she always goes, "No person, no person," and points to the corner where it sits. She also says, "No closet," and starts crying because it's dark in there at bedtime. It spooks me every time. Story 71. When my daughter was 3, almost 4, she would look at me and say, "So much meat." Chuckles. I'm not huge or anything, so apparently she's just a cannibal.
Chuckles. Oh yeah, my 3.5-year-old loves to talk about how we are made of meat, since he recently learned about this whole meat and where it comes from thing.
It was deer hunting season, and he saw someone had a deer hanging up to be butchered. Chuckles, it was just all downhill from there. For weeks, all we talked about was whether or not different living things were made of meat.
Story 72. When I was a child, I creeped my mom out multiple times. The first time was when I said that my friend in the woods visited me and that she would play with me. There was no friend in the woods. The second time that I creeped her out was actually recorded. I said that the time before I was alive, before I died, I was sitting beneath a tree and a man came up behind me and strangled me. The other time I freaked her out was when I was looking through a photo book. I was maybe 3, and I recognized and knew the name of her grandmother's dog. I had never seen this dog before. One more thing. My dad is not a believer in any of this, but I freaked him out so bad one time that he had to pull the car over because my great-grandmother and great-grandfather's song had come on the radio, and I knew every word, and I had barely even been speaking. I'm creepy. I own it. Kids are weird. Story 73. My 4-year-old daughter has informed me on multiple occasions that she has a brother and a sister who are in heaven with Grandmama and Pop-Pop. I had 2 miscarriages before her, so it gives me pause every time.
Chuckles, my 4-year-old daughter also calls heaven Kevin. So sorry about your miscarriages.
How far along were you? I had several miscarriages, and I've always wondered.
Story 74. My daughter told me, when she was 3 years old, that she could remember seeing me from the inside.
My youngest son remembers opening his eyes for the first time. He also remembers learning to talk and learning to walk. He only shared these memories with me because he was so distressed by them. He wanted to know if he was stupid when he was little and what was wrong with him. He could describe taking his first steps, etc., and exactly where that happened. He was about 5 when he had this mental breakdown, thinking something was wrong with him because he had to learn to walk and talk again.
I don't think my parents ever believed me, but I remember being born and the welcome to the world cake they had bought. I was also 3 weeks late, and I wonder if that had something to do with it.
Story 75. My little brother started manifesting symptoms of schizophrenia when he was just a small kid. We had no idea what was going on, but we just assumed he was being an imaginative kid, until I heard him screaming in his room by himself. I rushed in to see him yelling, "I said I won't," into the corner of his room.